Hello, my dear students. Welcome to my today's online class on one more topic of biodiversity, that is conservation of biodiversity. This is a very important aspect for any person who is interested to know about various aspects of biodiversity. And to date, there are two approaches of biodiversity conservation. One is in situ conservation of biodiversity, and the other is ex situ conservation of biodiversity. Both of them we are studying now. First, let us understand the meaning of in situ and ex situ. In situ means conservation of species in their natural habitats. For example, national parks, national reserves, etc. Ex situ means conserving the species in isolation of their natural habitat. That is, in zoos, botanical gardens, seed banks, etc. Okay? So, Avasetara Samrakshane is ex situ conservation. Avasadal Samrakshane is in situ conservation. We will see the different approaches of both in situ and ex situ conservations of biodiversity in next coming few slides. Okay. First, we shall take up in situ conservation. What you will do here is you will try to protect the natural habitat of the faunal and floral species and allow them to flourish there. But setting up of wildlife reserves is not just a matter of building up a fence around an area and let it grow, but at the same time, grazing should be taken care of. Without grazing animals, heartlands which contain a number of rare species will revert to the woodland. So, one should avoid this concept of grazing. You should not allow grazing animals into the natural habitats. That's one aspect. Then, establishment of nature reserves and national parks. First, the area that is suitable for the creation of a reserve needs to be identified and it has to be delimited. And this requires primary investment in terms of doing lots of surveys to collect data on the key species, and the property may have to be expropriated. Then you need to set up a legal framework to control the human activities in that area and in its immediate surroundings. This is a very, very important aspect to have regulations over anthropogenic activities not only inside the area but also the surrounding area. Then policing the area is also necessary. Okay. Like this in France, they have established a national park, Les Écrins National Park, like this, where they have brought about in situ conservation of biodiversity. Okay, few species have been conserved like this. Then, next is establishment of nature reserves and national parks. So, if part of the area has been degraded in a particular nature reserve due to unwanted land use, it may be need to restore these bad used land, and so that you can revive the biodiversity in that area. Apart from that, alien species that have penetrated the area may need to be eliminated. This is very important because the alien species, once they are inside the known habitat, they start destroying the existing local biodiversity species, okay, existing local biodiversity, and therefore, the alien species needs to be eliminated or excluded. Then constant management is needed to maintain the habitat of the species that is under conservation. This may mean arresting the natural succession. Okay? Then, what are the advantages of in situ conservation? The species, will have all the resources that is adapted to its living. So it appears as if it is in its homely dwelling place. That way, the species will continue to evolve in their own environment because it is its natural environment. It mimics its natural environment. The species will have more space, and bigger breeding populations can be kept. And it is always cheaper to keep an organism in its natural habitat than shifting elsewhere just for its conservation. Then, even in situ conservation, there are quite a number of problems which needs to be managed. First of all, it is difficult to control the illegal exploitation, that is poaching, what has been discussed while talking about threats to biodiversity. And the environment may need restoring, and alien species are difficult to control. So these are all some of the problems which need to be addressed. Then, after having learnt about in situ approaches for conservation of biodiversity, we shall learn about ex situ conservation. One approach for this is captive breeding. There is a species called Hawaiian goose. This was practically extinct in the wild, and people managed to get 12 birds into captivity, and they started breeding them, and the population went on, and finally a population of 9,000 was released back into the wild. But though such a big number of these Hawaiian goose were released into the wild, the entire experiment was a failure because the original cause for dwindling of the number was not addressed, that is the rats. Original cause of rats had not been eliminated. So if they were to eliminate rats and then release into the wild, then that should have been a good methodology. What happened was the rats normally eat the eggs and the nestlings of these geese. That's how this was a failure. This experiment was a failure. Unless you take care of so many other parameters, at times simply captive breeding may not help. All right. Then the species already which have reached the point where their populations would not recover in the wild, such species needs to be taken for captive breeding. It works well for the species that are easily bred in the captivity, but more specialized animals, which are sensitive enough, which will not breed in a captive area, where this strategy fails. So isolated in captivity, they do not evolve with their environment. When they are leading a natural life in their own natural habitats, along with the environment, they also grow, they also evolve. It is a natural phenomenon. And if they are isolated and brought into captivity, they do not evolve. This is one of the drawbacks of this type of ex situ conservation. Then, establishment of zoos. Sometimes it is mockery. It is called the land of living dead because they have a very small gene pool in the zoo, to mix up the genes, and inbreeding becomes a serious problem. Zoos and parks try to solve this by exchanging specimens or by artificial insemination technique wherever it is possible, or sometimes they go for in vitro fertilization and fostering by a closely related species. They have tried with this Indian gar, but to what extent it is successful is a question mark. And even if it is possible to restore a population in captivity, the natural habitat may disappear in the wild. By the time the population picks up, the number increases. By the time the species have adequate numbers so that they can be released into the wild, its natural habitat, which was existing once prior to the captivity, would have gone fat, would have disappeared. Then also it's going to be a failure. Then species that rely on this, much help, are often considered to be the living dead. So, though we are trying to establish zoos and consider it as a measure for ex situ conservation of biodiversity, at times, it turns into a land of living dead. Then, establishment of botanical gardens is more or less like captive breeding of animals, Originally, the role of botanical gardens was economical, pharmaceutical, and aesthetic. The range of species collected was limited, but the destruction of botanical gardens reflects the distribution of colonial powers. Okay? And most of them are found in Europe and North America, but unfortunately, faunal diversity is greatest in the tropical areas. And one more method is establishment of seed banks. Seeds can be maintained for decades or even centuries if the conditions are controlled. You have to maintain less than 5% humidity, and you have to maintain a temperature of minus 20 degrees Celsius. I'll tell you some more points about this little later. But the drawback is not all species are suited to establish these seed banks, and seeds need to be regularly germinated to renew stock, or the seeds will eventually lose their viability. Then seed banks are at the risk of power failure, natural disasters, war, etc. And if they are lost, means it's going to be a permanent loss. In that case, one has to be very careful and establish duplicate stocks. That gives a sort of some relief. Then seeds kept in seed banks do not evolve with changes in the environment. This is the most threatful biological aspect that needs to be addressed. Okay? Yeah. Before thanking, I have to give you some more information regarding the ex situ conservation. Okay. This is not there in the PPTs. Better you make notes, or I will supply this along with the study material. This is ex situ conservation is mainly done for conservation of crop varieties wild relatives of crops and also the local varieties, with main objective of conserving the total genetic variability of the crop species for future crop improvements. India has three important gene bank or seed bank facilities. One is NBPGR, National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resource. This is located in New Delhi. All agricultural and horticultural crops and their wild relatives are preserved by a method of cryopreservation of seeds, pollen, etc. by using liquid nitrogen at a temperature as low as minus 196 degree Celsius. Like this, they can be maintained for centuries. Varieties of rice, pearl millet, brassica, turnip, radish, tomato, onion, carrot, chili, tobacco, poppy, etc. They have been preserved this way for several years without losing seed viability. So this is one seed bank facility that is available in New Delhi of India, that is NBPGR, National Bureau of Plant Genetic Resources. Then another one is NBAGR, National Bureau of Animal Genetic Resources. National Bureau of Animal Genetic Resources. This is located in Karnal, Haryana. This preserves the semen of domesticated bovine animals. And third facility is NFPTCR, National Facility for Plant Tissue Culture Repository. This is inside the campus of NBPGR. This is for conservation of varieties of crop plants by plant tissue culture technology. Okay. So efforts are on the way to facilitate the conservation of various aromatic and medicinal plants, for which India is networking coordinator country. So like this, so many efforts are being made for both in situ and ex situ conservation of biodiversity. And my dear students, you may be asked to write short notes for 5 marks on ex situ conservation of biodiversity, so also in situ conservation of biodiversity. You should be able to answer after watching this video and study of the material that has been provided to you. With this, I end my lecture. Thank you for your patient hearing. See you in the next class. Thank you.